What is the creepiest glitch in the Matrix you have experienced? I didn't exist for couple of hours. So mobile alert. This happened 2 days ago. I was at my home because of quarantine and according to me I was sleeping. When I woke up my mum was looking at me having a very shocked and worried expression and tears in her eyes. She asked me where the hell I was and I said that I was sleeping right here in my bed. She didn't believe me, said she checked and I wasn't there. So apparently, my family woke up in the morning and I didn't come for breakfast. My dad came into my room and just saw the blanket and pillow. I do sleep with blanket on face. Then my mom came to wake me up and took the blanket off. No one was there. Then she panicked and told my dad. They searched the entire house and tried calling me, nothing worked. Then they asked the neighbors if they had seen me leaving, but neighbors couldn't help as well. My mum was very afraid at that point and they called the police, and that's when my dad had went to file the report and I woke up. We called my dad and told him I was back and he wanted an explanation and I couldn't give one. I said I was just sleeping and then I woke up and this whole thing has happened. I wanted to make it clear that I do sleep with blanket covering my entire body, and my mom did made it clear that she took the blanket off and no one was there. We all are very shaken. I called my dad in his past about more than 30 years ago. I recently posted about me disappearing into thin air when I was sleeping and my family couldn't find me, and when I woke they swore up and down that they have searched all over for me but weren't able to find me. This is not an update but something that just happened yesterday. 3 days ago I was having conversation with my father and he was telling me about his university life. Basically my dad came from nothing. He had a very difficult upbringing and went to the worst school and high school in our city. When it was time for him to join university, my grandfather passed away, leaving my dad to take care for the rest of the family as he was the oldest son. He took a wrong major because of the wrong advices of the people, and how he regrets that to this day. The courses were taught in English, which is a second language for us, and how he didn't even know the language. My dad told me that it was the darkest times in his life and he just wanted to run away and was even thinking of taking his own life. Now very recently he got his master's in English literature and he was telling me that he didn't think it would be ever possible for him. My dad just recently finished this degree at an age of 55. The next morning my dad had to drive to this town because his distant relatives live there and they are struggling financially. My dad is very a kind soul and he wanted to help them. The town is 3 hours drive away. He usually takes public transport but didn't because of recent crisis. He drove there and my mom was worried, so we decided we will keep calling him after every hour to check. Well, I decided to call him. Now keep in mind because its highway network signals get very weak. He told me to wait and parked at a nearby restaurant. It was like a checkpoint for trucks. I don't know what came over me but I started crying and went on to tell him how proud I was of him. I just babbled and kept saying that he shouldn't think he is lacking because he is not. He was an amazing father and a great person to look up to. You guys, my dad started crying. He told me that he will talk to me when he returns. Well, he returned and he just hugged me and was telling me that how 30 years ago he was visiting the same town and it was the time when he was at his lowest. He was visiting the same relatives and he was in a bus which stopped at a petrol station. He called his mother and when he picked the phone without even dialing he heard my voice. It was me telling him the exact same thing which I just said yesterday. He said that he didn't even call my grandmother, he just stood there and cried. It gave him strength to keep fighting. He said he just now realized it was me whose voice he heard. My parents are now taking this as sign from God who helped my dad when he thought no one was there for him. My dad's gut feeling. I was 17 at the time and me and my dad had just finished our fishing trip and it was almost midnight, mid-fall. When I was about to get in the car he told me that he did not want me to sit in the front seat on the ride home. We argued about it for about 5 minutes and he did not give any good reason to why he did not want me to. I gave up and got in the back seat. It was pitch black outside. When we had been driving on the main road for about 2 minutes we saw a car driving in our lane. Right as we were about to collide my dad swerved into the other lane and so did the car in front of us. I heard my dad say I knew it at the very last second and then I blacked out. Woke up when police showed up at the scene. They helped me out of the car. I was barely conscious and don't remember much after that. Only thing that is still a crystal clear memory is that I saw my dad, sitting in the car waving at me with tears in his eyes. When I later asked where my dad was I was told that he had flown out of the car window and landed only a few feet from the car and passed away later in the ambulance. I was told the man we crashed with died on impact and also had a 17-year-old daughter in the back seat who survived. I still can't believe that this really happened. This was 6 years ago. Edit, I believed that the gut feeling he had was that something terrible is about to happen, and if someone is going to die he chose himself instead of me. Therefore I believed he decided not to put the seatbelt on. Also I believed that it was his spirit saying goodbye since he wasn't able to do it. I died in late 2015. I was given a second chance. I've never used Reddit before, but a friend of mine was talking to me about the glitch in the Matrix subreddit, so I decided to share my story here, since I don't have any explanation for it almost 3 years later. Rewind back to September 2015. I was a freshman who had just entered high school 2 weeks prior. Already school was weighing down on me, and I'd been continuing a habit I had of going on walks to clear my mind. On this day, I'd been walking around a pond near my house. There's a trail that goes around the pond, and then the trail leads up to a set of abandoned train tracks on the other side, which sit about 15 feet above the path and pond below. After walking the circle, I was crossing the train tracks when I decided I wanted some ice cream. The fastest way to get to the ice cream shop was to take the path below the train tracks, but there isn't any way to cross the pond without going all the way back around, and being 14 years old, I decided that I could just jump from the tracks onto the path below and keep walking. Looking down from above, it didn't seem to be that far of a jump, so that's what I did. The next thing I remember after that was being half conscious in an ambulance. Everything was extremely blurry and the paramedics sounded slightly panicked. I wasn't able to move either of my legs, so I think they were both broken. This scene continued on for a few minutes, until we arrived at the hospital and I was wheeled into the emergency room on a stretcher. I only had a few minutes in a morgue before I eventually lost all consciousness, and that was the last thing I saw. After I'd been unconscious for what felt like about an hour, I opened my eyes and I was on the ground. I just hit the ground after jumping, but this time I was fully conscious. I hadn't noticed this before I jumped, but there had been a car parked watching me. I think they thought I was attempting suicide, but it probably looked that way, and the people in it had jumped out and called an ambulance for me. The ambulance ride had been the exact same as it was the first time, and I was put into the same emergency room that I had died in before. The only difference between the two events were that I was fully conscious this time, and my injuries were much more minor. I was discharged from the hospital the same night, with only stitches in my lip, a slightly fractured jaw and a mild concussion. For a while after this, I assumed that the first scenario had just been a weirdly coincidental dream that I'd had while I was unconscious, so I didn't consider it anything abnormal. It wasn't until a few weeks after, when my mum told me that the people who had helped me said that I had been conscious the entire time, I hadn't been knocked out after hitting the ground or anything. So, that entire scenario managed to happen in the few seconds it took for me to hit the ground, while I was still conscious. Anyways, I'm not very good at describing things, especially with how blurry this day was now that it was years ago. But, I'm 17 now, and I still have no way to explain what happened that day, other than I died, and was given a second chance. I think I just became the background character for another person's glitch. This technically happened last night, but I was just starting a graveyard shift and am only now getting it all down. I work at a gas station chain with only numbers in its name. We're just outside of a large chunk of suburbs done in that middle of nowhere, like we aren't exactly near any other businesses, but we are really completely dead for hours at a time. It was just past midnight, and with everything going on in the US right now, not a lot of things other than gas stations and bars are open at night anymore, so it was a slower evening. I was the only one in the store and a car pulled up to one of the two double-sided pumps out front. Pretty standard white 4-door. I'm not great with car brands, but it was a little nicer, like upper middle class and probably only a few years old. A woman gets out and starts walking towards our door like she's in a daze. Legit, this woman looked like she saw a ghost. She wanders up, sort of freezes at the door for a second with a 1,000-yard stare before opening it and coming in. She didn't go looking for anything, didn't start shopping, just sort of stood inside for what felt like ages. Again, bars are still open, so I think maybe she's a little drunk or had a rough night or something, so I give the usual welcome to gas station, let me know if you need any help finding anything, and she finally notices me and immediately asks me the weirdest damn question I have ever been asked on the job. "You can see me, right?" "Yeah." "Like what else do you say?" She breaks down crying in the middle of my store, so I'm already headed around the corner to see what's up. I have my cell phone out in case I need to call the cops or something for her. I get her to sit down on a nearby pallet of soda and I'm grabbing her a bottle of water, and after she catches her breath a little she tells me I thought I had died. Again, I'm thinking maybe she is on something, but she's a middle-aged woman who looks like a standard local suburban housewife. We're a pretty boring township without your average junkies like you'd find closer to the cities. So she asks if she can call her husband to pick her up and wait with me. She has her own phone and does so, not really telling him anything either, just where she is at and if he can come get her. He says he'll call an Uber and be there as soon as possible. We're waiting. So far nobody else has showed up, so I'm keeping most of my attention on her, and eventually she starts to explain to me I was driving home from dinner with my co-workers, and as I'm driving through nearby intersection I recognized a truck ran a red light and hit me. Now, her car is still at the pump without a scratch on it. She goes on to say she remembers her car being pushed into a pole, going airborne, and then nothing. I tried to calm her down, letting her know that her car is out front and it looks fine, but she insisted that she completely blacked out, woke up in an ambulance for a split second, passed out again, and then woke up again in the driver's seat of her car at the intersection waiting for the light to change, perfectly fine. This whole thing freaked her out so badly that she drove to the nearest anything, us, just so she could get out of the car. Husband eventually showed up to get her. He asked if I had any idea what happened, and even though she sort of explained to me, I just shrugged because no, I had no idea what was happening anymore. She reluctantly got into the passenger seat of the car and he drove them back home. That was hours ago, after which I worked an entire shift at the station trying to wrap my head around what the absolute hell I had just witnessed. My whole life is different and no one believes me. Update is at the bottom. I am sorry if this is the wrong place to post this. Mandela effect doesn't allow personal stories, only stuff with proof. This is gonna be long. This Wednesday, February 5th, on the way to work I went to my usual gas station. I go there every day, 5 days a week. I go in and everything is different. All new drink stations have been installed and the food area is completely redone. None of this was different Tuesday morning, and I couldn't believe that they'd redone a gas station in one night. I then go outside and see that 2 gas pumps are completely gone and there is mulch bags stacked taking up all the space. None of this was there the day before. I then leave and head to work and somehow turn on the wrong street and get lost. I've been driving these neighborhoods for months, and suddenly I'm lost trying to find my job. I get to work a few minutes later and I'm panicking. I know it's silly, but I've always feared changing timelines. My fiance and I have a timeline safe word, so we know we are together. I call and ask him and he has no idea what I'm talking about. We just talked about it at the end of January and we've had it established for a while. I've even woken him up at night and asked him after having nightmare and he's known. But now he has no idea what I'm talking about. Then the girls start coming downstairs. I work in an addictions group home, and one girl keeps saying how confused she is and how nothing makes sense today. Later in the day another kept saying all she wanted to do was cry and she had no idea why. Then while running errands I go down the same street I always do and suddenly there are 4 houses gone and a grove of trees planted. I've never seen them before and really started freaking. They are next to a building my family owned for the last 20 years. I know the whole neighborhood. My final straw was calling my mom today. She said my sister was going out tonight with her friend Jenna. I have known Jenna since 2003. I asked how much longer until Jenna has her baby. My mom goes silent and asks what the heck I'm talking about. She says she's never been pregnant. I look her up online, nothing. I asked my sister just a half hour ago and she laughs in my face and says Jenna is infertile and will never have kids. I literally remember the day my sister told me she was pregnant. She told me to guess who and Jenna was my third guess. What the hell is happening to my life? Edit update. I really appreciate all the support and kind words people have had for me. This whole experience has been very scary for me. As for a few questions people have had, it's getting hard to keep up. I'm going to answer them here. I have already taken an extensive online schizophrenia test on Friday night. It said that I'm fine and very low probability of it. As for CO2 poisoning, I have no gas in my home or the home I work in. Everything is electric. I opened up to my fiance and had him read this. He knew it had happened but didn't know how upset I was. I asked him if I had shown any signs of mental instability or Alzheimer's. I'm only 25 and he said I've never shown any signs and only some mild anxiety when things get crazy. Lastly, the safe word and things leading up to the day. We created the safe word mostly as a joke after I read the Berenstein Bears theory and I had a really weird day at my old job. It became more used when I'd have nightmares and when I made jokes. The day before was a normal Tuesday. Wake up, work, home, eat, sleep. The only strange thing about the day was that I thought I'd heard a scream or yell as I was falling asleep. I blew it off and still kind of blow it off as some sort of sleep paralysis or dreamy moment. Today my dead friend left something for me. I am a bit shocked. I had a very good friend who crafted small jewelry and I have a few pieces from her. I got a pair of earrings more than 8 years ago and lost one of it after wearing them just a couple of times. I always told her she had to craft a replacement, but unfortunately she got very sick and died of cancer very quickly. She never had the chance to craft anything else. I kept the single earring in a little box with some other small random memories and trinkets. I am now moving to my own place and checking the memories in this little box. Both earrings are there and I can't explain when or how or why. Probably in other universe my own me lost the unique earring she had. As a child, I might have predicted my year of death. It happens to be 2020. I'm 34 now and this story goes back to the year 2005 when I was looking through an old photo album together with my, now ex-girlfriend. My mother made a photo album exclusively with pictures of me from birth until approximately 2004, so it was a good occasion to show her my early years. As we came to the last blank page of the album, we found the year dates 1985 to 2020 written in child handwriting. Obviously, I'd say not older than 8 or 9. Of course I immediately recognized my writing style and we were both spooked as hell, because my year of birth is 1985. Back then in 2005, I was obsessed with a band called The Network and their album Money Money 2020, which gave me some extra chills, so I didn't know what to say. It was absolutely surreal. We instantly closed the photo album and never talked about it again, but of course, I never really forgot what I've seen there. I even eradicated the 2020 a few weeks or months later in the album and replaced it with an acceptable date of death, but the year 2020 was already stuck in my head. I learned to live with the thought, although it came back on New Year's Eve 2019-2020 when I was facing the fateful year. I was pretty confident that I would make it through the year without harm, and bam, coronavirus pandemic strikes us. Unfortunately, I have a heart condition that might not be too good when catching the virus, and now I'm completely freaked out that I won't make it through this year. Anyone with ideas or similar experiences? Follow up to my post about predicting my death in 2020. Hey everyone, first of all, Happy New Year, at least here in Europe. In agreement with the Modu, atheist comic, I'm posting a follow-up on my story about me somehow curiously predicting my, what I thought, year of death, which happens to be, or should have been, in 2020. See here, hope the link works as I'm on my mobile phone. Link as the old post already is in the archive and can't be commented any further. I'm posting this to somehow give you the confirmation of me surviving this year, at least in my country and time zone so far. I got a lot of private messages lately by users asking me about my current health and if I'm still alive and well. Thanks for that, but I found it easier to just post it here. Maybe it can be reassuring and soothing for those suffering from similar thoughts or glitches, worrying about their future. Looking back at this, it was more of a concern for me than I initially thought. The idea of not surviving this year was somehow always present, maybe subconsciously, but still in my mind, almost every other day. I know that this is not a guarantee for me living a peaceful and long life. Maybe I get hit by a bus tomorrow. But knowing that I can close this chapter once and for all in my life is very satisfying. Thanks for all the positive comments and messages you sent me over the course of the last 9 months. I felt myself die in another timeline. My mum and I were on the highway driving home, and there was a semi-truck in the lane next to us. Suddenly the semi swerved into our lane. Luckily my mom was able to get out of the way before it hit us, but soon after I began feeling strangely. The entire right side of my face felt hot and sticky. I tasted blood, and smelled a very pungent scent of gasoline. Then my head and right arm started to ache really badly, and I couldn't feel my legs. Just as soon as the pain started to worsen, it went away, replaced with a cold eerie chill. I told my mom about this and she couldn't come up with an explanation. I think I was feeling the pain in another timeline where my mom wasn't able to avoid that semi. My dog that died over 6 years ago joined me for dinner. It's 8:10 and I'm still eating dinner as I write this. I am not intoxicated. As I'm eating cheese sticks I hear a crackling of the kitchen floor, but I don't hear anyone moving around. I keep eating and a few moments later I swear my dog was just at the side of the table begging for food. Now when we got this dog from the pound she was big, we had to slim her down. We used to call her Keg Bus. Every Christmas I would give her a little bit of what I'm eating, just a little gift. I think she showed up this Christmas smile. I'm still in shock because it was so vivid, but I'm happy. I think I died in early July. Do you guys know the whole theory about how when people die in one timeline, they shift into another? I think that may have happened to me. Back in early July of this year, my family, M45, F54, me :19, B16, S13 were going on a road trip to Montana to visit our grandparents. Prior to the trip, I had a horrible feeling about going. I kept having flashes of car accidents in my head, and I was sure that we were going to get in one if we left. It was so strange, because I have a pretty severe anxiety disorder, but this didn't feel like my anxiety at all, and I never have anxiety about road trips. I love them. So we left Saturday of that week. I had told my parents I had a bad feeling about driving up there, but they dismissed me as being anxious, but I had never felt so certain about something in my life. Getting into that car felt like signing my death sentence. So we get about 6 hours in, and at this point, I start to think I was being ridiculous, and a wave of calmness just washes over me. This is where shit gets strange. My dad passes an underpass and everything just shifts. I feel like I saw everything in slow motion for a whole 4 or so minutes. My parents were joking beforehand, but their faces moved so slowly, and then the light in the car started to shift. This was the scary part because I thought I must have been going insane. For a few seconds, there was a huge illumination of light into our car, and I looked at my family, and could not tell who they were or what they meant to me. And then it's like everything just came back. The light shifted back, and I knew who everyone was, but it felt like something imperceptible had changed. I closed my eyes and tried to make sense of the past few minutes, and when I reached back to remember, I saw blood, our car and another minivan in shambles on the side of the highway right beyond the underpass, and mangled bodies. I remembered sensations I should not have known, what spattered brain matter looks like, the smell of something burning, the way I couldn't breathe. But this never happened? Yet I remember that the car in front of us had switched lanes even though there was a truck in front of us, realized it at the last second, and hit us with a lateral impact. I have no history of psychosis, and I have never been in any sort of car accident. This wasn't PTSD, and I have never had anxiety over being in the car in any sort of way prior to this. And maybe I could have just brushed it off, but I still think about it when I'm driving in my own car. And it's made me a more cautious driver. I don't know what happened, it was just a weird situation, and I remember having the distinct feeling in that moment that I had died in some sense. I am not a spiritually sensitive person by any means, I am a scientist at heart, but this truly was something I cannot explain. And I fully accept that I might be reading too much into this, and for some reason, I imagined an event that never happened, but I thought I would share anyway. Edit, a lot of people are me asking to use this on your channels or something. I don't think you need permission, but I am fine with that.
Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe.